People often talk about insecurities as regards to safety of life and property. But today we're here to talk about physical, emotional, and psychological insecurities and how to manage them and live a more rounded life. Okay, my name is May and I'm here with Chris Agboje. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, he's a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. You're going to tell us more about this when we come back from this short break. Welcome back. This is Catholic Faith Forum, and we are discussing managing insecurities. Okay, so tell us about your job. What do you do exactly as a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist?
So I was expecting you to ask if I could read your mind, because that's the response I get most times when I tell people I'm a psychologist. Hey, can you read my mind? But we don't read minds. I like to tell people that we are not sorcerers. We're not trained to read people's minds. But what we can do is to help people identify, say, maladaptive thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors that affect their ability to achieve their potential.
I heard one word there that I don't understand, though.
So that means there are behaviors or things that don't help us achieve our potential.
Okay. Okay, nicely put. Okay, so what are insecurities?
Okay, I think plainly put, insecurities are self-doubt or a feeling of doubt or lack of confidence in ourselves, in our abilities, or in certain situations. Yes, we hear political insecurities, securities from religious insecurity, whatever it is, but it comes down to that lack of confidence in whatever it is. Now, because we're talking about psychological and more of emotional insecurities, so we want to say that in this case, it's more of the person's lack of confidence in themselves or in their abilities.
Okay, so does everybody have them, or is just specific people?
So I would say yes, and I would say no. But I'll start with yes. Everybody has one form of insecurity or the other. But then it then comes down to how pronounced these insecurities are.
Okay.
So for some people, they have very pronounced insecurities that tend to affect their ability to navigate life, and that becomes very obvious. And so we're able to identify, oh, this person has one level of insecurity or the other. But if we're able to look at our lives from a more holistic view, we would see that one way or the other, we have one insecurity that we struggle with. So yes, everybody has.
Okay, can it be regarded as a medical condition?
No.
Okay.
Right, so insecurities are not disorders, right? But they can lead to disorders. Yes, they can lead to certain disorders like, say, depression, anxiety, say, emotional irregularities like anger outbursts and the likes. They can affect relationships, but they are not disorders. If not managed well, they can lead to, but they are not disorders.
Okay, so what are some of these causes of insecurities that we have?
Okay, so just like every form of psychological concept in terms of maladaptive behaviors, going back to that same word that I used.
I understand what it means now, so
yes,
no problem.
We like to trace it down to the person's childhood experiences.
Okay.
And for us, the parenting is very critical in developing that sense of confidence or the sense of insecurity. That's one. Parenting, childhood experiences, so people who have experienced physical or emotional or sexual abuse could also develop forms of insecurities as well. Perfectionism as well. Some people have that critical inner voice that tells them they are not good enough. Regardless of what they are doing, regardless of how well they are able to achieve things, they still have that voice that keeps on telling them, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And I like to say that those voices come from, they are borrowed voices, right? So you grow up from a family where your parents are telling you or constantly comparing you with other people. There's that likelihood that you develop such inner voice that keeps on telling you you're not good enough, even though the evidence actually does not support that belief. So for me, key is the childhood experiences and then maybe psychological or abuse that the individual might experience.
So you're saying the inner voice can be conditioned in a certain way?
Yes.
So I thought we all just had inner voices that just told us,
okay, so
this is good, this is bad.
If we start going in that sense, we want to now ask, what kind of inner voice? Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it your conscience?
Okay.
but psychologically, it's that voice that validates our presence, who we are, basically. validates what we do, what we believe about ourselves. We like to, so maybe what we do in the psychological term is to call it the core belief. There is that core belief that individual has about themselves.
Okay.
Some people have negative core beliefs, others have positive core beliefs. Now, these beliefs have a way of interfering or influencing
Anything you do.
the level of confidence the person has and how they exert themselves in life generally. A person who grows up with the core belief that they are not good enough, for example, is likely to have that level of insecurity. While an individual who grows up having the core belief that they are able to do anything they lay their hands on or anything they focus on would definitely have lesser insecurities as well.
Okay, so what are the different types? Are there different types of insecurities?
So that's tricky. I wouldn't say there's a clear classified types. There are clear classified types of insecurities. But what I try to do is to link insecurities to their effects or their causes, right? So I can say that a person could have an insecurity in terms of relationships, right? So personally, myself, growing up, I was able to navigate. So after I struggled with all my own childhood conflicts and everything, I was able to navigate and develop a sense of security or confidence in almost every area of my life, career-wise, financial. But I realized at some point there was that one area that I still had that level of insecurity, and that was marriage. So I had that fear, like what will happen? Would you marry right? What will happen? You know, and so it also applies to most people. There's always that area that you doubt,
find yourself still doubting
that you doubt
yourself.
or you are afraid of, or you experience sort of anxiety over. So if I want to talk about the types of insecurity, I want to link them to those areas that, so it could be relationship insecurity, it could be, say, career insecurity, it could be insecurity from the place of emotional confidence or control, interactions as well. You know, some people have that insecurity when dealing with people. Some other people have insecurity when dealing with specific tasks, maybe their career. You know, so you can see a person a computer genius, for example, who's very confident when you give him a computer. But take him out of the computer space and put him in the kitchen, for example, then you start experiencing that level of insecurity. Or you put him in a crowd to interact with people, and then you see that there's no confidence. But tell him to hack anything he wants to do. Tell him to build any, you know, like so this. Yeah, so it depends on what area you might be struggling with in terms of insecurity.
Okay, so can you list some of the common forms of insecurities that we have at the moment?
So for me, common forms of insecurity would be relationship, one. Why? So in practice, I've seen a lot of cases where, in marriages especially, clients come to you and they have that insecurity in terms of their relationships. Some of them begin to think that they are not good enough for their spouse. In some other cases, you find out that sense of low confidence begins to extend to feeling paranoid. You know, so
Is this before or after marriage?
So most times, insecurities would stem before situations, right? So there's always that underlying factor. We call them conflicts, unresolved conflicts that this person has not resolved, and get into marriage that same way. But I've also seen cases where an individual gets into marriage very confident in, I have clients like that, very confident in work, dealing with people outside, but because of consistent gaslighting or negative responses from their partner, over time they develop that low confidence in themselves. And I find out that most times it's targeted to that specific relationship. So I could have confidence dealing with other people, but maybe when I come to you, there's that doubt in my ability when relating with you. So it could be because there is something you're doing that affects the way I perceive myself.
The number one insecurity, present day, the top class is social media. You know, social media bully and stuff and the rest of all those stuff. So this is like a very big issue, and social media shows you a different view of life entirely than what is actually happening. So social media is like the biggest of all, and I think that's like the problem we have now in the whole Kenya.
Insecurities, well, young people today, there's a bit of a confidence issue with them. So people want to feel good about themselves, and if you don't get compliments on social media and all that, they tend to start feeling lonely, and some in a way it kind of leads to depression and all that. So I think being able to feel among your peers, like you have a voice, that people listen to you, they take you seriously and all that. I think that's the major cause of insecurity among young people these days.
Okay, insecurities now, I would say everybody wants to fit in. It's becoming a problem. And especially when you see some certain pictures on social media, most especially Instagram, you've got one of your friend with one of your followers with a picture looking all good, and you want to be like the person, and then you don't even know how the person came about, and everybody wants to have this they want to belong, so it becomes a problem. And then aside wanting to belong, then jobs, you're not working, you're with your peers and so many of them are working, it becomes a problem for you to identify with so many of them. Beyond that, I would say in general, I would say it's just trying to belong. That's a big challenge for young people today.
Okay, so how can these insecurities be overcome or managed? Can they be managed?
Yes, they can.
Okay, so
they
how?
can. So if when we started, we said that everybody at one point or the other would experience insecurities, one form or the other. For me, the concern is, how do you respond to it? How do you respond to it? Some people listen to the inner voice, the critical inner voice, and then they believe it. And they live their lives based on that, the negative response they get from this inner voice that they hear. So how do you deal with insecurity? The first things you want to do is to recognize what that inner voice is telling you. I like to tell people to voice it out, right? To voice it out. So I shared with you that for a long time, my own inner voice was telling me that I was a dreamer. And not from the positive perspective, because people would think that being a dreamer is a good thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't from a positive perspective. It was more from a place that being a dreamer means that you can't achieve anything.
You're just dreaming,
You're just
and not doing anything about it.
So the first things I needed to do was to connect with that inner voice and then voice it out. Voice it out in the second person. So you are a dreamer, right? More like somebody saying that to me.
Okay.
So I had to voice that out.
Does it make it feel more real or more achievable when you do that?
Yes, so what it does is that it brings the problem to the surface and gives you that ability to now deal with the problem. Because a lot of times people don't even know where the problem comes from.
True.
So we believe that, and it's a popular saying that a problem shared is a problem half solved, right?
Yeah.
But I think the reason why they say that is because if you are able to share, you gain a level of insight to what the problem is.
Even just by talking about it.
Exactly,
Yes.
and your ability to gain that insight gives you the potential to start dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to voice out that inner voice so for some people say, I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure, or I can't do this. Some people have that can't voice that keeps on coming up every time they want to approach something or do something.
Yes.
So you want to connect to that inner voice, and when you do that, you want to then say to yourself, is this true, right? Is this voice true?
Welcome to another exciting episode of Know Your Faith series. I am Collins, and today we'll be discussing why we call our priests Father. In Matthew chapter 23 verse 9, it says, call no one Father. But then we refer to our priest as Padre or Father, and some may now say that it means we've committed some sort of sin. But actually that is wrong, because if you actually look into the passage to understand, you see that Christ was actually talking to his disciples, encouraging them to focus more on the service and not on the honor that comes with the work. Because at that point, they were technically teachers and had earned the titles rabbi. Also calling our Reverend Fathers Father, the name implies it, it's also as a sign of respect. They are our spiritual leaders, and then they guide us throughout our spiritual journey in the church. So the priest is a father to us as they guide us spiritually and ensure that we grow and develop our spiritual life. Like other father figures, they take care of us with providing all our spiritual needs and ensure that we have spiritual development and nourishment. I mean, more so, there are other verses in the Bible that talks about the use of the word father, meaning that Jesus in himself did not condemn the use of the word father. We see in Acts of the Apostles, chapter 7, verse 2, Stephen addresses people and says, "My brothers and my fathers." So there's nowhere in the Bible that actually says that we shouldn't use the word. That was not the meaning of that passage, and a lot of people have misunderstood. But I believe that with this episode of Know Your Faith series, you've been able to understand why we refer to our priests as father. So yes, it is a sign of respect as they are spiritual leaders, and much like our own earthly fathers, our actual biological father, they provide our spiritual need and help us in our spiritual nourishment and development. So thank you for joining us today. Continue to watch by subscribing and commenting below. Till we meet again, be bold and be Catholic.
Welcome back. Thank you so much, Mr. Chris, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, so sad you have to go.
It's a pleasure to be here, and
Okay.
then, I'll be glad to come back if you invite me.
Any last words?
So I'd like to say that we are not perfect, and the goal is not to be perfect, but the goal is to get better. And so we must concentrate our efforts at getting better, learn from our mistakes, and keep on growing, basically. It's not out of place to feel insecurity, but the way you respond to it is what matters.
Okay, to watch this episode again and other episodes of the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Dominican Media Presents. Also, continue the conversation with us on our social media platforms at CFF on TV. Till next time, keep being saints in jeans and shirts.